Janai Broom, you are so clutch.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into this special live edition of Locked On Auburn. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby. Thank you so much for making us your first or second listen every single day. Ben Taylor of Auburn O'Black this morning and the Auburn Network hanging out with us, stepping in for Daryl. Daryl's in a plane right now. He did not get to see the clutchness that was Janai Broom at the end of that. Sloppy game for the Tigers. And you and I were texting before we watched the final few minutes here together. I mean, Auburn played sloppy throughout the entire game. Ole Miss came out strong, and Auburn had the lead for most of the game. But, I mean, those last few minutes are who the Auburn Tigers are. Like, when it's time to step up and when it's time for somebody to make a play, in almost every situation so far this season, somebody has. And thankfully, this afternoon, it was Janai Broom.
The losing streak is over. I mean, this is huge. I mean,
Sure.
This was a much needed win, in my opinion. I mean, it wasn't a must have win, but it was a must needed win, in my opinion. So now that may have completely locked up the number one overall seed, according to a lot of the quote unquote experts, even though I don't know if you caught it, the ESPN commercial where they were pitching bracketology and they made sure they picked Duke to be the final winner in the game, the person that did that. So thanks for that, ESPN. Appreciate that.
They know what they're doing. They love them some Duke.
They do love him some Duke. And so Janai Broom is what you said he was. I mean, if I'm being picky, because you talked about it being an ugly game,
it wasn't pretty.
Now, Auburn has become fundamentally inept. His rebounding was better than it was the last three games, not where we need it to be, but Janai got his double-double like we wanted him and needed him to do. But the passing and the soft passes and allowing people to get in the lanes, as well as I texted you, and I love Dylan. Dylan is a loved Auburn person, will probably never have to buy a beer in Auburn the rest of his life when he's visiting.
He had a rough game.
He is really regressed the last few games. Rebounding's not there. And I told you when I sent you the text, I said, and it's all related with him too. The defense, the fouls that's leading him to rush, which is leading him to turn the ball over, which is leading him to miss time on the bench. So he can't get in a rhythm. He's not taking shots when he's under the bucket because it's almost like the confidence isn't there. He's had a rough few games. Today probably being the worst that he's had with the turnovers and the fouls. So I would like to see him pick it up a little bit. At least his defense out on the perimeter is still there, but the rebounding underneath, as well as some of the just kind of crazy fouls that he's called. Now, one, when he took the ball away from the guy down in the post, that was not a foul. Even Billis agreed.
It was a good play. Yep.
And Billis agreed with that, which he hasn't agreed. He was pushing Ole Miss the entire game up until right there at the end.
He was pretty tough to listen to today. He was pretty tough to listen to. But
it's almost like those two guys feed off of one another for going against Auburn. But it is, again, much needed win. Move on, win and move on. That's the way tournament play is. This whole tournament's been that way, Zach. I mean, we saw
that's where I was about to head. Yeah, I mean, this has been such a competitive field as we all expected. And when the line dropped and it was like Auburn by 10.5, I think it ended up at 12.5 when it was all said and done. I'm like, I don't think so. It's just it could have happened. And if Auburn wouldn't have done some silly stuff, I mean, we'll talk about some of those specific plays maybe, but we're just not really seeing that at this point of the tournament. I mean, for folks who stayed up to watch Oklahoma and Kentucky, Missouri and Mississippi State, I mean, this has been, all of these have been battles for the most part so far. There's a few exceptions, but Ole Miss isn't a bad basketball team. And for folks acting like, just because Auburn beat them by like 30 or whatever in Neville, like Ole Miss isn't a bad team. They've won double-digit wins in the toughest conference in the history of college basketball. And this kind of goes into the fact of like, there's this whole thing. It might be tougher to win the SEC tournament than the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
And it's because like Ole Miss is maybe other than Texas, they were the worst remaining team in the SEC tournament.
Yeah.
Like they're going to be a 6 seed, probably a 6 or a 7 seed in the NCAA tournament. I mean, just to kind of put in perspective what you're looking at, Auburn wouldn't play a team on paper the caliber of Ole Miss until like the second weekend of the tournament is kind of what we're looking at.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I mean, I want to remind everybody that Ole Miss, and I said this last time you and I visited, I think we visited after the Ole Miss game. This is a team that the last two undefeated teams in conference play were Ole Miss and Auburn before they played one another. So this is a team that went into Alabama and won. I mean, this is went into Tennessee and won. I mean, this is a good program. And it kind of like we've talked about Buzz having Bruce's number. I think Bruce has got Chris Beard's number. And I think he is undefeated against Beard at this point. So,
yeah, well, he was going into today, and he won today. So, yes.
I thought that was right. So,
yeah, so I guess now I think he's 5-0 against Beard since he's been at Ole Miss, and then he beat Beard once.
Texas
Tech. So,
yep. And only won by 2 there. They've been close games. Beard's knocking on the door in order to upset Bruce at some point. It just hasn't happened. So, credit Ole Miss for what they did. I credit Auburn's perimeter defense as well, as Padula did not get the looks he's gotten the last couple of games. He had to really fight for it in order to get his points tonight. I mean,
Denver Jones, man.
Yeah.
Denver Jones will make you work for it. And hats off to Ole Miss, especially early. And I mean, even down the stretch too. Like some of the shots they were making were tough shots. I mean, I think Auburn did everything you could defensively. They played smart. They didn't foul. Like, I don't know. Sometimes I think Ole Miss was just ready for Auburn, and they got Ole Miss's best. And the fact of the matter is, I mean, we just kind of propped up Ole Miss for a second, a team with double-digit wins in the toughest conference in the history of college basketball. Ole Miss played their best. Auburn played sloppy, and you still won by 5. I mean, that just shows the upside of this team. Now, if folks are concerned about the level of play over the last 2 weeks of the season, maybe that's part of it. Is like, why are they not more crisp at this point? I mean, I'm a little upset with Miles. Like, that's just, those 2 passes from Miles were bad. It seemed like Tahad was careless with the basketball. And in March, the reason I like this Auburn team so much in March, there's several reasons, but one of them is guard play. Guard play wins in March. And that's what I think, there's all this attention on Janai Broome, and rightfully so. But Auburn's ceiling isn't because of Broome. It's because of their guards,
no doubt,
in my opinion. And we didn't see that ceiling come anywhere close to fruition today.
Well, it's that way every year in March. It's always guard dependent. I mean, we talked about that when, a few years ago with Miami, a few years ago with Baylor. I mean, when you've got guys that have been spending 4 and 5 years at a program, or at least in college basketball, even though it may not be at the same program, you expect them to be not fundamentally inept. You expect them to be on point. And those little things, that more crisp pass, especially when you're not carrying your bucket of water at one end. Like Miles, yes, he hit a couple of shots today, but he's not the same Miles that we saw a little while back. So when he's not scoring, we need him not to turn the ball over. We need him to rebound on those long rebounds when other teams are taking deep threes, and that long rebound comes out. We need him rebounding on the perimeter. And that I'm with you. That's disappointing, because I mean, that's 4 points that went the other way, because there were easy buckets when he turned it over. I mean, they were wide open. They was literally they had, it was just a gimme. It was like, here you go, take 2 points. And even there at the end, I'm not real sure where Chad Baker, why he was going to Janai, because clearly they were looking to foul. That's not the guy you want at the line. But then again, maybe that was a coach's call, because I'm not real sure why you have Chad Baker taking the ball out when he's your best free throw shooter and you know that they're going to foul.
Right. I think they just wanted to get it across half court. That's kind of the end. And they gave it to Denver, and props to Denver. That doesn't show up in the stat sheet or anything, but that press, Denver surviving all that. I mean, he was like inches away from, the baseline, and they just essentially handed it to him. That's not going to show up with anything, but I mean, especially with what we've seen throughout conference tournaments this week, a lot of folks have kind of choked and not delivered in those situations, and Denver did exactly that. And Denver was a good scorer today too. 5 of 8 shooting, 13 points. Like,
kept Auburn in the game first half. I mean, he kept them in the game. If it's not for him, because Auburn had a terrible first half. Janai missed a couple of bunnies underneath. The long rebounds were not going Auburn's way. Like, you texted me at halftime and you said, for as bad as we played and we're up 4, what is going on right now?
Yeah, it was a terrible half by us, and Ole Miss, like, really, I thought Ole Miss looked really good in the first half, and it's like, how are we winning? Like, this is great. I thought it would turn around, and I thought Auburn would win by more because of the score at the half. But Ole Miss, you could tell Ole Miss wanted this.
They did.
The knock against Ole Miss, and I mean, I talked to Stephen Willis about it on the show that we put up. yesterday, kind of previewing this game. His big thing was like, Ole Miss just needs to avoid 1 seeds. Like they can take out, like Tennessee and, Kentucky and all that. It's the 1 seeds. It's the Auburns. It's the Floridas. And that's really the biggest hole in their resume. It's like they're a solid team, but they can't beat the great teams. They wanted this. And Chris Beard doesn't like being winless against Bruce Pearl. They saw him on the TV broadcast. They had him mic'd up and a camera like they were shooting through some dude's armpit. It was insane. It was a great shot. I don't know if you saw that, but it was like the armpit cam. It was awesome. And he's like, this is Auburn. This is Auburn. And I think it's great. Like,
oh, I did see that. Yes, I did see that.
I mean, they wanted this, and Auburn held off. And I mean, this was kind of our biggest fear. Like, this was the biggest argument against Auburn, against whoever they were going to play when we had these conversations leading up to the SEC tournament was, is Auburn going to be ready? Is Auburn going to be ready? They've lost their last 2. It's going to be easy for them to fall flat because this game doesn't matter. And they won. Yeah. And in March, in these tournament settings, you just take the wins. Don't overthink this.
No. And I think Jay Billis said it best where he said there at the end, I don't know if you heard that when he said, this is a team that
really tuned him out. Really tuned out Jay Billis.
He said, if they score 100, Auburn's still happy with that. If they have a knockdown drag out like this and they only score 50 or 60 points, they're still happy with that. They do a great job of adjusting. That's going to make a huge difference when the tournament rolls around next week in situations such as that, especially if Auburn gets that number 1 overall seed, because they're going to get everybody's best. There's enough tape out there. I mean, and that's the advantage. Let's put that in perspective too. Give Ole Miss a little bit of credit. Being the 3rd time playing them, they knew exactly what to do to Auburn. They had Auburn reeling a little bit offensively. Of course, I will say that in their defense, they didn't have to do a whole lot defensively for Auburn, because Auburn at one point in time, when you get to looking at offense, hardly anybody was moving. They were just moving Broom around and trying to get him open and trying to ISO him. So there wasn't a lot of movement elsewhere. So that allows the defense to kind of sit back and be a little more relaxed. But overall, defensively, Auburn had a good game. They did what they needed to down the stretch in order to protect the ball and win. And with what we've seen, not just in this tournament, Duke was behind Georgia Tech all day in the ACC tournament yesterday. And so this is going on nationwide. There's other teams that have been upset. Colorado upset somebody. West Virginia, like that. They upset
it's March. It happens 100%.
Yeah. And so be happy with the win. Trust me, if it's ugly, it's still a W. You get to, now at this point, you get to keep playing. So I think that's a good thing.
Yep. I agree with you. So Auburn takes down Ole Miss 62-57 in a game that, I mean, I guess there was, I was going to say Auburn kind of felt in control for most of it, but I don't know if I entirely agree with that. So who do we want Auburn to play moving forward? What else do we need out of this SEC tournament? That's on that. And also comment your player of the game. If you want to add the caveat other than Janai Broom, you absolutely can. All that's coming up on this reaction. Auburn takes down Ole Miss. Today's show brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Ben, can you imagine wagering on sports anywhere other than with our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook?
Not legally.
No. FanDuel Sportsbook is where it's at. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 of extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even to who's cutting down the nets. Auburn is the odds-on favorite to win the national championship, and those odds, I think, actually got a little bit larger after the Cooper Flag injury yesterday. So if you want to go ahead and jump on those odds, you certainly can over at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen after all of the Auburn basketball action as Auburn beats Ole Miss 62-57. A lot of people giving Denver Jones love in the live chat, and I have to agree. I have to agree with that. You mentioned his scoring in the first half, what he did defensively, and then, I said, him taking care of the basketball down the stretch when there's a lot of pressure on him. Denver Jones was exceptional today.
He's one of my favorites because he's able to bounce back. He's able to have a short memory. I think you remember the last 2 games, the 2 losses, Denver had some pretty notable turnovers up top, kind of what Miles did today. He corrected that today. I mean, if Denver Jones doesn't have the game that he has, Auburn is one and done in the SEC tournament and sitting back home in Auburn, Alabama, instead of in Nashville, Tennessee. So Denver is, as Bruce said, going to half. He used to be known as a bucket getter, but and this year he got known as defensive, a defensive prowess amongst everybody. But now I think that people are realizing this is a great overall player. Denver Jones is a great overall player. He still grabbed a couple of boards as well on some of those long rebounds. So he does fundamental things such as box out. He was throwing crisp passes tonight instead of some of the lazy passes like you saw from other people. And he hit some big shots in the first half, which Auburn needed because that allowed them to have that lead going into half that you and I said did not feel like we had the lead going into half.
Right, but you take it. You take more points. That's all that really matters here. As far as what's next for Auburn, they will play the winner of, I assume it's about to start, Texas and Tennessee. And, of course, Texas, this will be their third game in 3 days. I don't want to speak for all Auburn fans, but I'll speak for myself. Like, I would love to play Texas tomorrow instead of Tennessee.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, I think Tennessee's got a chip on their shoulder for Bruce. I think they got a chip on their shoulder for Auburn. I think that, and Texas may take advantage of that. Tennessee may be looking ahead now that they know that Auburn's won and they know that their opportunity is there. And so they may be looking ahead. However, I am with you. I think just about every Auburn fan should be with you in that aspect, especially, I mean, I told you that's why I would have loved to have played the winner against Ole Miss because we didn't know if it'd be Arkansas or South Carolina back when you and I, did a pod earlier this week. And everybody goes, why? I said, because you love playing guys that have played like 2 games in 2 days or 3 games in 3 days. So that's another reason I'd love Texas. 3 games in 3 days and you get them. Yeah,
especially in this scenario, it'd be the day after they play Tennessee, which is going to rough you up. And the day before that, they played A&M, which is going to rough you up. So, I mean, they'd be just physically out of gas. And I think emotionally, they'd be at the point like, we've done enough to get into the tournament as well. I don't think it would be close. I don't think it'd be close. I mean, that's why I would have rather played Arkansas today than Ole Miss, because they would have been exhausted. And that came down to it, too. That was clutch shooting by Ole Miss there. And I think we saw the energized version of Ole Miss in the first half for sure, but I kind of expected it to die down and it never really did. So hats off to Ole Miss. I think they're a solid team. They did a good job of, I told you, I texted you immediately because I thought that was great. We knew Auburn was getting the ball out of the half. They went down to Broome and on a call play that they probably drew up in the locker room, they said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and jump out on them at the beginning. Right.
Ole Miss responded immediately. And that's when you go, okay, so they did come to play. Because I told you, I said, if Auburn can go out and get a couple of buckets to start the second half, I really like where this game could go. And Ole Miss did a great job of keeping Auburn from getting in a rhythm and making that run. But credit Auburn, as we've seen them do all year, Zach, the response is a team comes back, they tie it, they get within 1, and then all of a sudden you look up and there's back up 7 or back up 9. And you're right. If you're another team, that's got to be demoralizing for teams that play against Auburn because they're sitting there going, man, we were there. And it just left us.
Yeah, and hats off to Ole Miss. I mean, it felt like, I guess it was the first 10 minutes of the second half. So I guess the third quarter of the game, if you will. I mean, it felt like Auburn was up by 7 or 8 points, and then they'd get back within 2, and then they get back at 7 or 8. And I actually said out loud to Leah, I'm like, we can't extend this past 8. Like, that's dangerous. It only takes a second, for Ole Miss to come back. And that's exactly what they did. So, I mean, once again, hats off to Ole Miss for not backing down. They wanted this. They were prepared for this. And it didn't happen. It didn't happen. Chris Beard can't beat Bruce Pearl.
One thing we haven't touched on, and they didn't do a great job of poking and prodding him. Chad Baker, to me, had kind of a
You didn't really notice him that much.
Yeah. You didn't notice him. He still made a couple of buckets like you needed, a real big one at the end, along with the and one. Had a big 3 that stopped the momentum a little bit earlier in the game that he had a step back after going behind the back. So that's the Chad Baker that I like seeing. He had also, I think the refs gave him some cheap fouls. I still think they've got his number. I think 2 of the fouls were a little cheap, but overall the refs did okay. If Daryl were here, he would be so upset with me right now because I'm talking about Pat Adams. It was 17 fouls, I think, to 17 fouls or 17 to 16. So
you didn't really notice Pat Adams.
You didn't notice Pat. Didn't notice Pat at all.
I think Daryl would agree with you. I think Daryl would agree with you because I don't think he thinks Pat Adams is like an awful official. I think he hates that he makes it about him, and I don't think he made it about him today.
He didn't. We didn't go to the monitor a ton. The one time we did, Auburn got the benefit of the call. You and I were talking. I was like, that's not a goaltend in my opinion.
I'm shocked they called that, by the way. I'm glad they did, man, the end would have been way more sketchy if it hadn't have been. But I'm a little surprised that they called it a goaltend. It was so close. I didn't think they were going to give it to him.
I didn't know if there'd be enough. I guess they were looking at since they called it up front, there wasn't enough evidence to overturn it or something because.
Is that how it works in basketball?
I don't think it does. I think you can. It's easy to do that, but it was. I told you because we kept blowing it up on the screen. I was like, man, I don't know. I was like,
it was close.
I was like, I don't know if I give them that or not. And then when they said bucket Pat goes bucket good, I was like, oh, he loves us today.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, shout out to the fan. I saw where somebody tweeted out that there was a fan that every time it got quiet would just tell Pat Adams he's not good. He's not having a good day. And it was very vocal. You could hear it within the entire arena. And Pat looked at him. He even looked at him and smiled a couple of times. Is what the tweet said. So
wow, he was getting his attention.
Yeah, he was getting his attention. Good for him.
All Pat Adams wants is your attention. That's it. Hey, Josh has a good comment here, and you and I have a similar opinion on Chris Moore. I know some Auburn fans don't like Chris Moore's game, but I think he's important. Yeah. Josh says, Chris Moore to me is the defensive player of the game. Padula could not score on him, and even defending, he was not a mismatch to bigger players. It shows how well he can adjust. Chris Moore is like, he's not going to score you points.
Nope.
He's not going to score you points, but he is a solid role player defensively. He's not a liability on offense because he's not going to shoot it a ton.
Right.
And to me, I think Chris Moore is a larger part of what this roster is, even if he's just going to play a few minutes. It seemed like he played more today. Let me confirm how many minutes he played. 16. Okay. So a little bit more than normal. So, but yeah, I agree with this. I don't know if he had a better defensive game than Denver, but I am glad that Josh wanted to shout out Chris Moore there, and I'm here for it.
The reason I'm here for it is because I've said before, kind of in the same boat as Dylan, even though Dylan has not played very well the last couple of games. With Chris Moore, the unselfishness is just there. He's had opportunities to go elsewhere and decided to stay at Auburn. You're talking about a guy that when he was in high school, he was averaging double digits. Now he knows even sometimes when he's wide open, he doesn't take the shot unless the shot clock's running down. He knows he has to. He waits to find somebody open to give it to a better offensive player. He accepts his role. He does it with a smile on his face, and he's always hustling. So, a guy like that, great, as I say, great team guy. Great team guy. You got to love him. If anybody hates on Chris Moore, he's another one. He should never buy a beer in Auburn anytime he comes to visit in the future, just of what he's given this program.
I'm with you. Bruce Pearl had used a questionable word. Have you seen this?
No.
I can't play it, and I can't read it, but that's hilarious. That's hilarious. I saw some people in the live chat. I'm like, what are y'all talking about? Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Well,
that'll be all over. That'll be all over Twitter later. I'll find it.
Yeah, no, I just pulled it up. I thought I'd have to dig for it. Nope, it was right there. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. Yeah, people are saying it's hilarious. Chris is saying it's hilarious. So,
good.
All right. So obviously, I think we're all in agreement there. Live chat agrees with us. Mm-hmm. We would love to play Texas, but I think Auburn can certainly beat Tennessee again for sure. But the fact that it's in Nashville, it's going to be like a home game for Tennessee. But this Auburn team seems to play better in road situations anyway, at least from deep or away from Neville. So, I mean, who knows if that even matters with this team?
Well, last year it turned into Neville North. I got a sneaky suspicion that there'll be just as many Auburn fans as there will be Tennessee fans there tomorrow if Tennessee ends up winning. I think it'll be close to 50-50. I mean, I think it's close enough that there are a lot of fans that are willing to go. So it'll be. I'm looking in the chat too, and now I know what the word is that he said. So who did he say that about, by the way?
He said his guards are not that word.
Oh, well, some of the passes were. Just saying.
Let's move on from that. Yeah. So I'm expecting Auburn to play Tennessee, but it'd be great if it was Texas. So
yeah,
we'll see.
No, we'd much rather have one. Then it would definitely be Neville North because the folks from Austin, Texas, are not coming here. Or not going to Nashville.
Some of them are probably frustrated because, like, can we fire our basketball coach now if we get into the tournament? That's going to be fascinating to watch. It's going to be fascinating.
They could learn a thing. I don't know if he's as good, but they could learn a thing or two about what Missouri did keeping their coach. They had every opportunity to move on. The guy went over, and Missouri is a very good ball club this year. So
true.
Just saying, before they throw the baby out with the bathwater, they may need to rethink on some things because they're making a big charge late.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. We will see what happens. I want to give a quick shout out to Lindsay and Daryl. They filled in for us yesterday. I had to step away for a good chunk of the afternoon and early evening for some family stuff. So thank you guys for filling in, and they did a great job. If you missed that show this morning, be sure to go and check that out. Ben, thank you for filling in for Daryl as he's traveling today. How can people check out everything that you've got going on?
Man, go to aunetwork.com, do a show Monday through Friday in the mornings. Of course, we have you on to do sports on Locked On Wednesday, so we'd love for people to join us just after 7. And you can click on that WANI logo or just download the Radio Alabama app. We'd love to see you.
Yes, and of course, we'll be live after Auburn takes on either Tennessee or Texas tomorrow, so you don't want to miss that. Please be sure you're subscribed.
Texas.
Yeah, hook them for today only.
Hook them
for today only. We'll see what happens. But yeah, be sure you're subscribed on YouTube or on audio, and we'll see you next time. This has been a live edition of Locked On Auburn.